everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who don't want to just survive and instead want to thrive. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on Monday! Yay! As you guys know, our show is structured around the CSCS. They are Tai Chi principles adapted from Peter Ralston that we've really found are the difference between surviving and thriving. They're being calm, surrendered, centered, connected, and complete. Every weekday we go through one of them, mostly because we need a reminder.
Yeah. And just kind of, it's nice. There's 5 principles. There's 5 days of the week. So, yeah.
And hopefully, it's like in Tai Chi, at least in my Tai Chi class, where, just being around them and hearing it repeated over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I've been going to this class for 6 years, and I still feel like every time I go, I'm just like, oh man, I needed that. I needed that reminder.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to build kind of a new practice and rhythm of life in our own lives, and that's what we're talking about on this show all the time too. And it takes practice. It's so, especially depending on how old you are. So how much have you spent establishing your current routine and your current habits? It's hard to rebuild that stuff, and it takes sometimes an equal amount of time to set up a new normal.
Yeah, and just intentionality. So that's how the show is. Hopefully it's a reminder for you guys, just like it's a reminder for us. We tell people that come into our Tai Chi class that it's like being a sponge, You may not even realize that you're absorbing it, but just hearing it every single day really does change your perspective gradually over time. So this week we are talking about boundaries.
Yeah, and this, I don't know, do you think this is a new topic? It's got to be new for some people and probably something a lot of people have heard of, but this is another thing where it takes practice and it takes kind of a big brain shift often to actually really apply it.
So what are boundaries?
Yeah, today we're going to map out what that is actually. But yeah, it's kind of the ways we interact with people, the way we maintain our autonomy and respect them with dignity and respect too. And it's a way of interacting that honors all the parties involved. It has to do with, the big thing I always think about with boundaries is actually saying yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jesus talks about that on the Sermon on the Mount. That's in Matthew 5. In 33 through 37 there, he's talking about your oaths. You don't have to make a big deal about making an oath. Just say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. Like when we're kids, when we're trying to talk our friends into, we're trying to convince them that we really mean what we mean. We're like, I cross my heart and I hope to die. Or,
Pinky swear.
Yeah, different ways to swear and stuff. And it's like, so this is, and where this really hits the road and when it starts to steal our calm is when we say yes to things we don't really want to say yes to. This happens in a church all too often, I think. But in normal life, we overcommit, we allow other people to put things on our plate, and that's not boundaries. It becomes a big problem. It steals our peace real quick.
It is hard, though. And I think, especially in Christianity, there's such an emphasis culturally, not scripturally, but culturally on saying yes means that I love you and that I'm willing to sacrifice for you.
Yeah.
Even if I internally am resentful and frustrated and burned out.
Yeah. And we may be avoiding conflict. We're not very good at that either. Maybe we should talk about that one week on the show. But because that's something, we're trying to grow in too. But yeah, we think, if we say no, they're not going to like me anymore. Like you said, maybe they don't think I care about them, or if I care, I'll say yes. If I really love and respect this person, I'll say yes to everything. Right. And that's not true. What's your layman's definition of boundaries?
Saying no. At least for me, that's what it looks like. I mean, boundaries are also listening to other people's no. So if that's something you struggle with, that's part of boundaries.
And saying yes. I mean, from your, that's what when you need to have better boundaries, that's what you do. Right.
Yes. It really has nothing. I can say yes pretty easily, but saying no, that's a stretch. For me, when I don't have boundaries, I feel like pressed in on every side, and I just dread seeing anyone or talking to anyone. I still have trouble answering the phone because it was so ingrained in me from high school to college that the only time people call is when they need something. And so like in college, I couldn't even listen to my voicemail because I would get a panic attack from listening to this list of people.
List of requests, list of demands.
Right.
Sure.
I just feel so stressed out and overwhelmed. And fortunately, I had some great friends who were willing to listen to my voicemail and write it down on a piece of paper, which was easier for me to handle saying no to a written request than a like.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Everything's easier for you on paper.
It is. It's true. But a written request is so much more impersonal. I don't have to listen to somebody and they're like,
Sure.
Here's my rationale. I really need you to do it. Blah, 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 blah. Like, I just have a friend write, so-and-so wants you to do whatever. And then I could be like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good example of where the people who can't hear other people's no and the person who can't say no, like, that's not a good team.
No.
There, and both people need a lesson in boundaries so they can respect
Right.
each other.
Right. Well, and we've talked before about the analogy that Cloud and Townsend use of a garden, that we are all gardens, and our fruit in our garden is our time, our resources, our talents, the things that make us us.
Yeah.
And then, boundaries are the wall that goes around that garden. And
it should be a strong wall.
Right. But it can't be, because the 4 types of gardens are people that have no wall. So they just say yes to everything. They let in the good and the bad. People come in and take their fruit whenever they want. And then the person who has such a strong wall that nobody gets in. They never say yes to anything. They just say no all the time. And then the person that, has a gate, a door to get into their garden, but they only let in the bad things because they don't feel like they deserve any of the good.
Sure.
So they can't accept love. They can't receive care. And they just give and give and give and give, regardless of whether it's a good request or a bad request. And then the person who has a wall to keep out the robbers and has a gate that's discerning, that lets in the good and keeps out the bad. And that's what we want, ideally.
Yeah. Yeah. You see that third one when, if somebody is like, oh, I just don't take compliments well. Like they are so closed off that they can't just receive a simple like, hey, you did a good job on that report or something. Wait.
It's hard for me to do that. That's one of those
It's hard
things
for a lot
where
of
I'm
people.
like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that could be a big indicator.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I think the big obvious one is like, oh, I've just said yes to too much and I overcommitted. But that's another, like, a more subtle one, I think.
Right. Well, and I think sometimes we also, when we're thinking about boundaries, we neglect to think about boundaries with ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we need to do the same things with ourselves. We need to say no when that's the essence of self-discipline, is to say no when it's time to be doing something else, or, to say
like
yes.
self-control stuff.
Right.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Yes, I'm going to exercise right now, even though I don't feel like it. But still listening, that's such a great example, because so many people push themselves to the point where they're losing health.
They don't hear their
over it.
bodies no.
Right.
And their body's
you
like,
have
I can't do this.
Right. You have to listen to your body's no, but then also say yes when you just are like,
Right.
And
understand the difference. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to, this we'll unfold this as the week goes on, but, knowing what to say yes to and what to say no to is going to have so much to do with understanding ourselves through the self-examined life and understanding God and his calling on our life. Because otherwise it's like, well, what do I, then you don't want it to just be you being like, well, that seems, yeah, sure, that seems fine. And, oh, that seems, there's a standard and some guideline there. And it's all unfolding in our relationship with God.
Right. There's a great section in Tools of Titans where Tim Ferriss talks about your no and your yes. And he was like, he realized he was saying yes to too many mediocre things. They weren't bad, but they were mediocre. And once you recognize that time is the most precious thing that you have, you're not willing to waste it on mediocre things. So he was like, he never says yes unless he can say hell yes.
Yeah.
This is the best thing ever. I'm so on board this. 510%, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I wish we'd have an attitude like that in church and in our own personal ministries. Like, I think too often we've said yes to, because people, it takes help and it takes an army of volunteers to run a church. And so there's people constantly trying to recruit for volunteer for this and for that. And we feel like, well, I probably should. I mean, that seems like a pretty good idea. But you want to say yes to like the stuff you really is part of who you are and part of your calling.
We'll get into more on Wednesday, but we want the people who are passionate about whatever, doing the thing they're passionate about.
Yeah.
You don't want the clothes designer who hates clothes or the baker who's like, oh, I just want to be an accountant. Like, we want people matched up with what they're good at and passionate about.
So yeah, well, it'll be good. I'm looking forward to unfolding it as the week goes on.
So hopefully this gives all of us something to think about. If you are not versed in saying no, you can practice.
That's right. I mean, that's the key to all of this
Just
stuff.
like we were talking about, right? Like last week, growth mindset. You can practice saying no. The first time my therapist was like, you need to say no to something every day, I was like,
and that doesn't mean
do it. No.
And it doesn't mean you march into your boss's office and just yell no at him. Say no to something a little bit more digestible if you've never done it before.
Exactly.
Say no to, I don't know, somebody on the bus who like wants to take your seat or something.
Something a little more low-key. Yeah. But definitely stop and think about what kind of garden you are. Because if you don't know, that can be such a good diagnostic tool. And if you don't know, you can always ask friends and family. They probably do know. And they would probably tell you. All right. We love you guys. And we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show and listening to the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. Come back tomorrow and we're going to talk about surrender and boundaries and how to make those things work together.
All right, we'll talk to you then.
Have an awesome Monday. Yep.